The umbral requiem drifted through the void like a wound in space itself. Its obsidian hull absorbed light rather than reflecting it, creating a ship-shaped absence against the star field. Captain Vex Korath stood on the bridge, his cybernetic, eye tracking the energy signatures of the Hegemony patrol fleet approaching from the Veil Nebula. 3 years ago, he would have transmitted identification codes and requested passage. Today, he smiled with predatory satisfaction. "Captain," came the voice of his weapons officer, Naya Stellarwind, her pale blue skin luminescent in the bridges, crimson lighting. "The Hegemony Squadron is demanding our surrender. They're broadcasting Admiral Threenox's execution warrant." Korath's flesh hand clenched while his mechanical fingers drummed against the command chair's armrest. The warrant was 3 months old, issued the day he'd witnessed the Hegemony's pacification protocol on Ashval Prime. Men, women, children, all vaporized because their mining colony had dared to petition for better working conditions. The footage still played behind his augmented retinas when he closed his eyes. "Weapon status?" he asked. "All dark matter cannons charged, void torpedoes loaded. The new quantum disruptors are online," reported Stellarwind, her voice steady despite knowing what was coming. The Hegemony had created the Umbral Requiem as their ultimate enforcement vessel, a ship designed to break rebellions and silence, descent across the galaxy's outer rim. They'd filled its crew with their most loyal operatives, enhanced them with military-grade cybernetics, and programmed absolute obedience into their neural implants. What they hadn't anticipated was Korath's encounter with the Ashval Resistance's quantum hacker, a dying woman named Zephyra Nightwhisper, who'd spent her final breath uploading a liberation virus into his command codes. The virus had spread through the ship's network like wildfire, severing the loyalty implants of every crew member simultaneously. For the first time in years, they could think, feel, and choose freely. The revelation of what they'd done in the Hegemony's name had hit them like a supernova. Korath remembered the silence that had fallen over the bridge as 200 souls, realized they'd been puppets in a campaign of systematic genocide. "Sir," his navigator, Kalen Voidborn, called from his station. "They're powering weapons. 30 seconds to firing range." "Good," Korath said, standing. "Signal all stations. Today we begin the reckoning." The Hegemony Squadron consisted of 5 heavy cruisers, each one a monument to oppression, their hulls adorned with the twisted spiral symbol of the galactic hegemony. Korath had served on ships like these, had followed orders that turned worlds to ash and civilizations to memory. "No more. Target the lead vessel. Full spread. Dark matter cannons." The Umbral Requiem erupted with devastating fire. Lances of concentrated dark energy tore across space, striking the Hegemony flagship Imperial Dominion. The cruiser's shields flared and died, its hull cracking like an eggshell as exotic matter ate through its atomic structure. "Direct hit," Stellarwind announced. "Their flagship is venting atmosphere." But this wasn't about a single battle. As the remaining Hegemony ships returned fire, their plasma bolts splattering uselessly against the Requiem's adaptive shielding, Korath activated the ship's long-range transmitter. His message would reach every occupied world, every resistance cell, every soul crushed under Hegemony rule. "This is Captain Vex Korath of the free vessel Umbral Requiem. We were the Hegemony's sword, but we have chosen to become their executioner. The age of their tyranny ends now. To every world that bleeds, every species that suffers, we are coming. The Black Ship remembers every atrocity, and we will have justice for them all." 6 weeks after the destruction of Admiral Threenox's squadron, the Umbral Requiem materialized from quantum fold space above the industrial world of Kronos 7th. The planet's surface glowed with the hellish light of 10,000 factories, each one staffed by enslaved populations from dozens of conquered species. Korath studied the tactical display showing the orbital defense platforms, 37 battle stations arranged in a defensive grid around the most productive slave world in the Hegemony's industrial sector. "Reconnaissance complete," announced his intelligence officer, Lyra Stormheart. Her silver hair shimmered as data streams flowed directly into her neural interface. Population: 4 billion slaves, 200 million hegemony overseers. Primary exports: weapons, starship components, and processed rare metals. Defensive capabilities include Class A orbital platforms and a garrison fleet of 22 vessels. Korath nodded grimly. Kronos 7 represented everything he'd helped the hegemony build, a machine that ground civilizations into raw materials. The slave barracks were visible from orbit, massive gray structures that housed entire species in subhuman conditions. His enhanced vision could detect the transport ships ferrying workers to and from the surface, their holds packed with beings whose only crime had been existing on worlds the hegemony wanted. "Sir," called Chief Engineer Dominus Ironforge from his station. "I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the defense platforms. They're not just orbital weapons, they're equipped with planetary bombardment arrays." The implication hit Korath immediately. If the slaves ever rebelled, the hegemony would incinerate the entire surface rather than lose their grip on the system. It was the same protocol they'd used on Ashval Prime, the same scorched earth mentality that had turned him against his former masters. "New plan," Korath announced. "We don't just destroy the defenses, we liberate the slaves first." His crew exchanged glances. They'd all seen what hegemony forces did to liberated populations. The standing order was simple: if you couldn't control them, eliminate them. "Lyra, identify the primary slave communication networks. Dominus, prepare the liberation packages." The liberation packages were Korath's innovation. Quantum data bursts containing everything the enslaved populations would need to coordinate a revolution. Tactical information, weapons schematics, shield frequencies, guard rotations, and most importantly, the knowledge that the Black Ship had come to help them. As the Requiem began its approach, hegemony forces moved to intercept. The garrison fleet launched from their orbital bases, 22 destroyers and frigates forming an attack formation. Their commander, Commodore Vex Darkthorn, transmitted the standard demand for surrender. "This is your final warning, traitor vessel. Submit to hegemony authority or be destroyed." Korath's response came in the form of quantum torpedoes. The exotic weapons punched through space-time itself, emerging inside the hegemony formation and detonating simultaneously. 3 ships died instantly, their hulls folding in on themselves as localized gravity wells crushed them to singularities. While his weapons officer coordinated the space battle, Korath focused on the liberation operation. "Transmitting freedom. Protocols now," Lyra announced. "Packages delivered to all major population centers." The effect was immediate. Across Kronos 7's surface, factory work ground to a halt as enslaved beings received detailed instructions for uprising. Emergency lights began flashing in the slave quarters as hidden weapon caches, revealed by the liberation data, were opened for the first time in decades. "Sir," Stellar Wind called from weapons, "the orbital platforms are rotating toward the surface. They're preparing to fire on the population centers." Korath's eyes blazed with cold fury. "All forward batteries, target the bombardment platforms. Show them what happens when they threaten the innocent." The Umbral Requiem unleashed its full arsenal. Dark matter cannons tore through the orbital defenses like they were constructed of paper, each shot precisely calculated to disable the bombardment systems while leaving the defensive weapons intact. The freed slaves would need those guns to protect themselves once the hegemony sent reinforcements. As the last defense platform exploded in a cascade of plasma and metal, Korath opened a channel to the surface. His message reached 4 billion. Newly freed beings across dozens of species. "People of Kronos 7, you are no longer slaves. Fight for your freedom and know that the universe is watching. The Black Ship remembers your suffering, and today we have given you the tools to end it." The rebellion on Kronos 7 had lasted 18 hours. By the time hegemony reinforcements arrived, They found a world transformed. Former slaves had seized control of the factories and converted them into weapons manufacturing facilities. The umbral requiem was already gone, but its message echoed across the galactic network. Resistance was possible, and the black ship would return. Captain. Korath stood in his war room studying the holographic display of the galaxy's spiral arms. Red markers indicated hegemony strongholds, while green dots showed worlds where uprisings had spontaneously erupted in the wake of Kronos VII. His ship's actions were creating a cascade effect. Hope was spreading faster than hegemony forces could contain it. "Status report," he commanded. Lieutenant Commander Raven Nightstorm, his communications officer, stepped forward. Her violet eyes glowed with data streams as she accessed the ship's intelligence network. 15 worlds have declared independence in the past month. The hegemony has responded by deploying pacification fleets to 12 systems. They're burning everything they can't control. Korath's jaw tightened. This was the pattern. The hegemony would rather rule over ashes than risk losing their grip on power. What about our priority targets? The Nexus station remains heavily defended, reported Stellar Wind. It's the primary coordination hub for hegemony operations in this sector. Intelligence suggests they're moving Admiral Vex Shadowbane's entire battle group there. The Nexus station was more than just a military installation. It was the nerve center that coordinated the enslavement of entire star systems. Every order that had condemned worlds to servitude had originated from its command centers. More importantly, it housed the hegemony's central database containing the locations of every slave world, every hidden facility, every dirty secret of their galactic empire. "Sir," interrupted Dominus from his engineering station, "I'm detecting an encrypted transmission on our quantum channels. It's from Zephyra Nightwhisper." Korath spun around. The HFY hacker who'd freed his crew had died months ago, her life consumed by the effort to break their neural programming. "Impossible. She's dead." "The transmission is automated, sir, triggered by our approach to this system." Dominus's mechanical fingers danced over his controls. "She embedded it in our ship's core systems before she died. It's a gift." The main display activated, showing a ghostly hologram of the woman who'd given them their freedom. Her image flickered with quantum static, but her voice came through, clearly. "If you're receiving this, Korath, then you've kept your promise to fight the hegemony. What I'm about to give you will end their reign forever, but the cost will be absolute." Hidden in the Nexus station's core is the Omega Protocol, a quantum virus designed to simultaneously disable every hegemony ship, station, and facility across the galaxy. The virus exists, but it requires a specific carrier frequency that can only be generated by the Requiem's dark matter core. The hologram paused, as if Zephyra was looking directly at Korath across time and death. "Activating the protocol will require you to overload your core systems. Your ship will be destroyed, and everyone aboard will die. But every hegemony installation in the galaxy will go dark simultaneously. Every slave will be freed, every orbital bombardment platform disabled, every prison ship dead in space. The choice is yours, Captain. One ship's sacrifice to liberate the galaxy." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Korath's crew stared at him, understanding the magnitude of what they'd just learned. In their hands lay the power to end galactic tyranny, at the cost of their own lives. "Captain," Stellar Wind said quietly, "the crew deserves to know. This has to be their choice, too." Korath nodded slowly. "All hands. This is the captain. Report to your duty stations for a ship-wide briefing. What I'm about to tell you will determine the fate of every living being under hegemony rule." As his crew assembled, Korath realized that their journey from enforcers to liberators was approaching its final chapter. The black ship had awakened something in the galaxy, a flame of resistance that would either consume their oppressors or die trying. The crew of the Umbral Requiem voted unanimously. 473 souls, each one a former instrument of hegemony tyranny, chose to sacrifice themselves to break the chains binding trillions of beings across the galaxy. The vote had taken place in the ship's main assembly bay, with Korath addressing every department from engineers to weapons specialists. "We were created to be their perfect weapon," he had told them. "Today, we choose to be their final judgment." Now, 3 days later, the Black ship approached the Nexus station through the treacherous asteroid field of the Maledictus system. The station itself was a monument to hegemony engineering, a massive construct the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons platforms and surrounded by the largest concentration of military vessels in this arm of the galaxy. "Sensor sweep complete," reported Navigator Kalen. "I count 347 vessels of various classifications. They've assembled the Crimson Fleet, the Iron Fist Squadron, and what looks like the entire 5th Pacification Armada." Chief Intelligence Officer Lyra added her analysis. "The station's defensive grid includes 42 heavy plasma cannons, 136 torpedo tubes, and, sir, they've installed singularity mines throughout the approach vectors. They're not taking any chances." Korath studied the tactical display. The hegemony had learned from his previous attacks. They'd assembled overwhelming force and defensive measures specifically designed to stop the Requiem. Under normal circumstances, approaching the station would be suicide. Today, it was exactly what they intended. "Dominus, status on the Omega Protocol preparation?" The chief engineer's scarred face was grim. "Dark matter core is running at 110% capacity. I've removed all safety protocols and rerouted power from life support systems. When we trigger the overload, the explosion will tear a hole in space-time itself. The quantum cascade should reach every hegemony facility instantaneously through their own communication networks. Time to detonation once initiated? 17 minutes. That's how long we need to survive in the heart of their defenses to ensure the virus penetrates deep enough into their central systems. 17 minutes to fight through the largest military formation in hegemony space while their ship literally consumed itself from within. Korath found the poetry appropriate. They would burn themselves out like a star, and in their death, illuminate freedom for the galaxy. "Sir," Stellarwind announced from weapons control, "I'm detecting movement in the enemy formation. Admiral Shadowbane's flagship Eternal Dominion is moving to intercept. She's hailing us." Korath had served under Admiral Zara Shadowbane for 7 years before his awakening. She'd been his mentor, the one who'd taught him the ruthless efficiency. That made him the hegemony's most effective enforcer. Now she was the architect of their most brutal campaigns, the mind behind the pacification protocols that had sterilized dozens of worlds. "Put her through." The view screen flickered to life, revealing Shadowbane's angular features and cybernetic eye implants. Her uniform bore the platinum insignia of a high admiral, and behind her stood the command crew of the hegemony's most powerful dreadnought. "Hello, Vex," she said, her voice carrying the weight of shared history. "I trained you better than this. Surrender now, and I'll ensure your crew receives clean deaths rather than the punishment protocols." "Hello, Zara," Korath replied. "I learned well from you, perhaps too well. I know exactly how the hegemony deals with those who oppose them, which is why we're here to end this cycle forever." Shadowbane's expression hardened. "You're outnumbered 300 to 1. Your ship is impressive, but you're not invincible. Stand down." "We didn't come here to win, Admiral. We came here to finish what you started when you taught me that some causes are worth dying for. The difference is, I finally found the right cause." The transmission cut, and immediately the hegemony fleet began moving. Korath watched the tactical display as hundreds of ships formed attack formations, their combined firepower enough to vaporize a small planet. "All stations, this is the captain," he announced ship-wide. Omega Protocol is now active. In 17 minutes, every slave in the galaxy will be free. Until then, we are the thin line between hope and despair. Show these tyrants what free beings can accomplish when they choose to fight." The umbral Requiem surged forward into the storm, its dark hull absorbing the light of distant stars as it carried its crew toward their final battle and ultimate victory. The umbral Requiem carved through the hegemony battle line like a blade of pure vengeance. Korath's crew fought with the desperate fury of the doomed, their weapons systems pushed beyond all design tolerances as they burned through the enemy formation. The ship's dark matter core pulsed with unstable energy, 13 minutes remaining, until the Omega Protocol would tear them, and every hegemony installation in the galaxy, apart. "Forward shields down to 30%, shouted Stellar Wind over the din of exploding bulkheads. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Engineering. "Teams, seal those breaches," Korath commanded, his voice carrying over the ship's internal communications. Around him, the bridge sparked and smoked as overloaded systems fought to keep functioning. "Dominus, core status. Quantum Cascade is building beautifully, Captain," the chief engineer replied, his voice tight with excitement and terror. 10 more minutes, and the virus will achieve perfect resonance with hegemony command frequencies. The Requiem shuddered as Admiral Shadowbane's dreadnought Eternal Dominion opened fire with its primary batteries. Massive plasma bolts crashed against the black ship's hull, each impact sending shockwaves through the superstructure. But the experimental armor held, layers of quantum-folded matter that absorbed and redistributed energy rather than simply resisting it. "Return fire, all batteries," Korath ordered. The ship's response was devastating. Dark matter cannons and quantum torpedoes lashed out at the hegemony flagship, punching through its shields and tearing massive gouges in its hull. But for every enemy vessel the Requiem damaged, 3 more took its place. The hegemony had committed everything to stopping them. "Sir," called out Raven from communications, "I'm receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. The resistance networks are coordinating massive uprisings on 17 worlds. They're timing their attacks to coincide with the Omega Protocol activation." Despite the chaos around him, Korath smiled. The enslaved populations hadn't just been waiting for rescue. They'd been preparing for revolution. When the hegemony's systems went dark, they would be ready to seize their freedom permanently. "Navigation, bring us about! We need to reach the station's command core!" The Nexus station loomed before them, its weapons platforms tracking their approach with mechanical precision. The station's defensive fire joined the fleet barrage, turning space around the Requiem into a hellstorm of energy and metal. But the black ship pressed forward, its crew fighting with the knowledge that every second they survived brought galactic liberation closer. "Hull breach on the bridge level," Kalen announced, as atmosphere vented through a crack in the viewport. "Emergency." Barriers slammed down, but the ship was dying around them. 8 minutes remaining. "Captain," Lyra called from her station, blood running from a head wound. "I've penetrated the station's outer network layers. The Omega virus is propagating through their communication systems, but it needs to reach the central command matrix for full effect." "How much closer?" Korath demanded. 2 kilometers. We need to get within 2 kilometers of the station's core." Korath looked at the tactical display. The Nexus station bristled with close defense systems designed specifically to prevent exactly what they were attempting. As they approached, the station's weapons would only grow more concentrated and deadly. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced. "We're going in. Brace for maximum burn." The Requiem surged forward at full power, directly into the teeth of the station's defenses. Point defense lasers carved through its hull like surgical instruments, while torpedo spreads bracketed the ship with nuclear fire. The artificial gravity failed, then kicked back in with violent surges that threw crew members against bulkheads. "Forward hull completely compromised," Dominus reported. "We're losing structural integrity across all forward sections." 5 minutes remaining. "Engines to maximum," Korath ordered. "If we're going to die, we die moving forward." The black ship's drives ignited with desperate power, carrying them through the final layer of defensive fire. Around them, the Nexus Station's superstructure filled the viewports, an artificial world of metal and tyranny that had coordinated the suffering of trillions. 1.5 kilometers, Lyra announced. Virus penetration at 70%. Then, Admiral Shadowbane's voice cut through their communications, transmitted directly to Korath's command console. You always were too stubborn for your own good, Vex. If you won't surrender, then you'll die knowing you failed. Emergency Protocol 77 Alpha. Authorization Shadowbane Omega Prime. Korath's blood froze. Protocol 77 Alpha was the hegemony's ultimate contingency, the simultaneous nuclear bombardment of every slave world in the galaxy. If they couldn't maintain control, they would ensure no one could ever rebel again. 3 minutes remaining, and the choice between personal victory and universal genocide. All hegemony vessels, implement Protocol 77 Alpha immediately. Admiral Shadowbane's voice echoed across every communication channel. Nuclear bombardment of all slave worlds begins in 4 minutes. If we cannot rule the galaxy, we'll cleanse it. Korath watched in horror as the tactical display updated. Across the galaxy, hegemony vessels were moving into bombardment positions above populated worlds. Kronos 7th, where they'd sparked the first rebellion. The mining colonies of the Outer Rim. The agricultural worlds of the Verdant Sector. Billions of innocents about to die because he dared to fight for their freedom. Captain! Lyra screamed from her station. Omega virus penetration is at 90%, but it needs 3 more minutes to achieve full propagation. We can stop the bombardment, but only if we survive long enough. 2 minutes and 40 seconds until their ship's core overloaded. 4 minutes until nuclear fire consumed every enslaved population in the galaxy. The math was impossible. They were 20 seconds short. Dominus, Korath called. Can we accelerate the cascade? Not without losing the virus entirely, the engineer replied. The quantum frequencies have to build naturally or the whole system collapses. The Umbral Requiem shuddered as it pressed deeper into the Nexus Station's defensive fire. The ship was more wreckage than vessel now, held together by determination and the gravitational fields of its overloading core. Sections of hull peeled away like shed skin, but still it pressed forward. 1 kilometer, Stellar Wind announced. 0.5, we're almost there. But even as they approached the optimal range, Korath could see the futility. They would arrive. With seconds to spare, trigger the virus and watch it spread across the galaxy just moments too late to stop the bombardment. Everything they'd sacrificed would be meaningless. Then Raven's voice cut through the despair. Sir, I'm receiving a transmission from the resistance networks. They're targeting the bombardment fleets themselves. The communications display lit up with reports from across the galaxy. On every world marked for destruction, the freed populations weren't just hiding in bunkers, they were launching captured hegemony vessels, improvised weapons platforms, and converted civilian ships against the bombardment fleets. The uprisings they'd inspired had become a coordinated military response. Kronos 7th reports successful engagement of the 7th Pacification Squadron. Raven continued, tears streaming down her face. The mining colonies have destroyed 3 dreadnoughts using converted asteroid mining equipment. Every world is fighting back! Korath understood immediately. The resistance wasn't just waiting for the Omega virus to save them. They were buying time for it to work. Across the galaxy, ordinary beings were throwing themselves against overwhelming military. Might to protect their families and their hope for freedom. Distance optimal range achieved, Lyra announced. Virus propagation complete in 3, 2, 1, mark. The Umbral Requiem's core reached critical cascade failure. Dark matter and exotic energy began tearing holes in reality itself as the Omega virus rode quantum shockwaves through every hegemony communication network simultaneously. But instead of instantaneous death, Korath felt something impossible. Time seemed to slow as the virus spread. He watched the tactical display as red markers across the galaxy began blinking, then going dark. Hegemony vessels powered down in mid-bombardment. Orbital platforms went silent. Prison ships drifted powerless in space as their automated systems failed. In less than 60 seconds, 3,000 years of galactic tyranny simply stopped. "Sir," Stellar Wind whispered, "the bombardment fleets are dead in space. Every one of them." Around them, the Nexus station's lights flickered and died. The massive weapons platforms that had been tearing their ship apart moments before now hung motionless in space. Even Admiral Shadowbane's flagship had gone dark, its massive bulk drifting powerlessly among the debris of the fleet. "All hegemony installations are offline," Lyra reported, her voice filled with wonder. "Every slave world, every prison, every factory, they're all free." The Requiem's core stabilized as the quantum cascade completed its work. They had somehow survived their own sacrifice, witnesses to the greatest liberation in galactic history. Around them, space filled with emergency transmissions as 4 trillion beings across 1,000 worlds realized they were no longer slaves. "Captain," Dominus called from engineering, "we've got maybe an hour before complete hull failure. Long enough to see what we've accomplished." Korath nodded, then opened a channel to every functioning receiver in the galaxy. "This is Captain Vex Korath of the free vessel Umbral Requiem. The hegemony is finished. Their fleets are powerless, their stations dark, their reign ended. But freedom isn't given. It's taken and held by those brave enough to fight for it. The galaxy is yours now. Make it worthy of the price that was paid." 6 months after the Omega Protocol had silenced the hegemony forever, Captain Korath stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Freedom Station orbiting Ashval Prime. The world below had been rebuilt by its liberated population, its cities gleaming with the architecture of hope rather than oppression. Where once mining equipment had scarred the landscape, gardens and memorials now honored those who had died for this moment. The Umbral Requiem was gone, its hull finally surrendering to the damage accumulated during their final mission. But from its wreckage, the survivors had salvaged something more valuable than any weapon: the ship's quantum transmitter array, now the centerpiece of the Galactic Liberation Network that connected every freed world. "Status report," Korath requested as his former crew members gathered around the central holographic display. Stellar Wind, now serving as military coordinator for the emerging Free Worlds Alliance, activated the galactic map. Green indicators showed liberated systems, while yellow markers indicated worlds still organizing their new governments. Notably absent were any red markers. The hegemony's command structure had been so centralized that when their network died, their entire civilization had collapsed overnight. 947 worlds have declared independence and formed democratic governments, she reported. 312 are still in transition, mostly dealing with former hegemony collaborators. Only 57 systems have experienced significant conflict, and most of that is settling down as war crimes tribunals establish justice. Dominus, his mechanical parts now integrated with cutting-edge civilian technology, added his analysis. The former slave populations adapted faster than anyone expected. Turns out 3,000 years of oppression created incredibly resilient and resourceful societies. They're not just surviving freedom, they're excelling at it. Lyra stepped forward, her intelligence networks now dedicated to connecting liberation, movements across the galaxy. The most remarkable development is the emergence of the Remembrance Protocols. Every freed world is creating detailed records of hegemony atrocities, ensuring this history is never forgotten or repeated. Korath nodded approvingly. The galactic community that was emerging from the hegemony's ashes wasn't seeking revenge. They were building something entirely new, Former slaves were becoming teachers, engineers, artists, and leaders. Species that had been forced into brutal competition were discovering the benefits of cooperation. The galaxy was healing. "What about Admiral Shadowbane?" he asked. "Still alive," Raven reported from her communication station. "She and the surviving hegemony leadership are being held on the former prison world of Tartarus 9, which the freed populations have converted into a rehabilitation facility. The interesting thing is, without their neural programming and chemical conditioning, many former hegemony officers are horrified by what they participated in. This was perhaps the most unexpected outcome of their victory. The Omega virus hadn't just disabled hegemony technology, it had severed the neural control systems that had turned ordinary beings into instruments of oppression. Across the galaxy, former enforcers were waking up to realize they'd been as much prisoners as their victims. "Any regrets, Captain?" asked Kalen, who now served as a navigator for the new exploration fleets mapping previously forbidden regions of space. Korath considered the question seriously. They had set out to break their chains and had ended up liberating an entire galaxy. The cost had been enormous. Millions had died in the various uprisings and conflicts that followed the hegemony's collapse. But billions more were now free to live, love, create, and dream without fear. "None," he said finally. "We were created to be weapons of oppression. We chose to become instruments of liberation. That choice echoes across every free world in the galaxy." As if summoned by his words, the central communicator activated. The image that appeared was of Zephyra Nightwhisper, not the dying resistance fighter who had freed them, but a digital consciousness constructed from her memories and expertise. The liberated populations had found her consciousness fragments in the Requiem's quantum core and rebuilt her as their first truly free artificial intelligence. "Korath," her reconstructed voice carried warmth and satisfaction. "I wanted you to see this before the official announcement. The Galactic Council has voted unanimously. They're commissioning a memorial fleet, 1,000 ships, each one named for a world that died under hegemony rule. And the flagship, they want to call it the Umbral Requiem." Korath felt something he'd rarely experienced in his augmented existence. Pure joy. Their ship's name would carry forward not as a weapon of the past, but as a symbol of freedom's future. "There's something else," Zephyra continued. "The Council wants to offer you the position of High Admiral of the Memorial Fleet. They say the galaxy needs someone who understands both the cost of tyranny and the price of freedom." Korath looked around at his crew, his family, and saw the same answer in every face. They had been soldiers of oppression who became warriors of liberation. Now they had the chance to become guardians of freedom itself. "Tell the Council we accept," he said. "The black ship may be gone, but its mission continues. We'll watch the stars and ensure that freedom's flame never dies again." As the communication ended, Korath stepped to the observation window and looked out at the galaxy spread before them. No longer did he see conquered territories and enslaved worlds. Instead, he saw a vast tapestry of free civilizations, each one writing its own story of hope and possibility. The Umbral Requiem had been created to unleash vengeance on the stars. In the end, it had unleashed something far more powerful, the unbreakable will of free beings to determine their own destiny. And that will would burn bright across the galaxy for all eternity, a beacon of hope that could never be extinguished. The age of the hegemony was over. The age of freedom had begun.